Good morning, my creative collective. Welcome to lesson number 13. We're doing this, we're working through, we're getting there. Today's lesson is sugar-coated nightmares. We'll get to A Course in Miracles. The workbook lesson itself is a meaningless world engenders fear. Now, what I really loved about this particular lesson is it sharpens our perspective. It sharpens our perspective because we are suddenly faced with this understanding of, we see how much the meaning that we make in the world and of the world is tied to this sort of fallibility of thought processes. In this dynamic, there's a versus energy, right? There tends to be some kind of competitive this thing versus this thing, and they're in battle with one another. And that's symptomatic of sort of 3D thinking that is restricted to either or, right? There's a polarity, there's a binary, there's a 3D thought process that involves a specific one right way of doing things. When, more 4D and, well, I should just say multidimensional ways of viewing a situation, it pulls us into a place of nuance, both and, right? The premise of improv is yes and, right? Something happens and you respond in turn, yes and, right? Or try to. Competition for meaning takes center stage, and we have to begin to ask ourselves, what is it that we're putting all of our investment in terms of the thoughts that we have? What are we thinking about most? But this, I'll read to you from the Course itself. So lesson 13 says, recognition of meaninglessness arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. So all the separated ones just meaning those who are in a more egocentric place, and not egocentric as in I'm amazing. That can sometimes be the case, but this is just more identified with ego and identified with their thoughts and identity, and disconnected from heart centers, right? From heart spaces. So recognition of meaninglessness arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. It represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other as to whose meaning is to be written in the empty space that meaninglessness provides. Ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality, and on this alone it is correct. So then jumping to the next section here, if you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with images that do not exist. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you, who you equate yourself with the ego. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with images that do not exist. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you, who equate yourself with the ego. The exercise today is to look at the world and say, I am looking at a meaningless world. And then repeating that statement, a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. But the competition and that versus energy here is really just a competition for meaning, right? A competition for what is more true about the world, the thoughts that I think about it, or the objective truth that it holds. One of the precepts of A Course in Miracles is nothing real can be threatened. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing real can be threatened because only love is real, right? And if only love is real, then the thoughts that we have that disconnect us from this truth, from this more objective reality, that spans many different things. So this, one of the ways that I can often see objective truths are that they thread through, differences of faith, differences of culture, differences of background, all of these things. So nothing real can be threatened and only love is real then. Now that seems like an oversimplification, but how do we apply that in the everyday, right? We apply that in the everyday by returning to the present moment and understanding that when we feel anxiety, and I get it, right? Like I feel anxiety too. There's a call and there's less of a need to find the right way to think about a situation. We don't need to find the right way to think about something. We need to find the right way to sink into the present moment. And there's no right way to do this because we move beyond the binary of right and wrong. And we begin to see what actually is real, is that sense of peace that overtakes us there, right? We seek meditation. We seek these things to remove the thoughts that we're thinking, to slow down the thoughts that we're thinking. what I enjoy about A Course in Miracles so much is that it focuses on the process of making it so that you don't need to seek out meditation as a salve. You don't need to seek out meditation as a way to stop the bad things from happening. Here, it's sort of getting to the root of the problem. It's getting to the root of the disconnect. It's getting to the root of the ways that we are completely separate when what we're striving for constantly is this oneness, right? This oneness. We can choose how we encounter systems. So part of this is we exist in a world with systems, and to neglect that is, I think, it's not about missing an opportunity to talk about something, because systems are not an opportunity for discussion. They are things that many people live within and that are very real in their effects, right? We can think whatever it is that we want about how we exist in that system, but it doesn't negate the existence of the system, right? So I think that this is not just about correcting our view of the separation that we experience so that we return to a oneness, but it's also remedying the view of the system itself so that we can shift how we see it and how we see ourselves. And that is going to, I think, precipitate liberation from these systems. As more and more people get to this place, which more and more people are, right? These are the ways that social movements are impacting us as a collective. We can choose how we encounter systems. So I can engage with systems and people who might try to erase me and my transness or my neurodivergence from this planet and from the energy. But I have to choose to engage from the energy of the screaming match of this is who I am and this is what that means. It's the screaming match that people get into because they are declaring that it's impossible for you to be who you are, because the meaning that they've made of a world, it is not compatible, right? So this is where it's like, it's not just about accepting differences. It's not just about accepting differences. This is about understanding that systems for me are an opportunity. I can see systems for the opportunity they present to know my multidimensionality and the power of my choosing that. It's not a neglect of the truth of a situation then, or a subjective realization, but the encompassing of a reality whose threads of realizations lead back to a more objective truth. So what do we choose? The fear that is engendered in the world that we see concretized and sometimes spatialized, right, is because the ego is being confronted with the truth of what it actually is, right? When we try to pull away the meaning that gets ascribed to things, this is a response of the ego, and that's the screaming match. The ego gets pulled into these screaming matches, and this isn't, I say that as an energy. It's not the literal interpretation of this. It's an energy of upset. When we think about this in terms of white supremacy, some folks have really benefited from being white for decades, years, centuries. And instead of facing that truth and seeing it for what it is, the meaning that we've made and this need to be innocent, right? It's a misapplication of this innocence because we understand that we participate in that system, and until we realized we were participating in that system, we could not then divest from the things that we got from it. We could not then divest from that. We could not then say to the ego constructions that system created, no thank you. I have a bigger truth that is much more objective than the subjective reality of superiority in this way. I have a much more objective truth that I'm seeing, and this is the meaning that I'm making and seeing in the world. Some folks may not like these conversations or enjoy that they're happening, but they are deeply spiritual conversations because they involve a collective, and it's a collective shift that's happening. And that when we return to that present moment, we don't have those superiorities. We don't have those supremacies. We don't have those hierarchies. We don't have those competitive versus structures. The meaningless world that we've created with our thoughts and our illusions about the world, that does cause a significant amount of fear for us. The anxiety, though, is not that it exists. The anxiety is not the monsters that are in the closet somewhere waiting to spring out and jump at us. When it comes to this particular exercise, the meaningless world, it causes fear because we're believing in an enemy that isn't there. And this versus this competitive, like, one against another, this against that, this or that, instead of maybe both and, except for when we're talking about white supremacy, because there's no that is not a both and ever. The fear comes from forgetting what it means to find that objective truth. What does love actually mean? What does choosing love actually mean, right? If we've been operating from the ego space for so long, we can forget that, right? So we can forget that, and that will feel fearful to be called back into it. That will feel terrifying, right? Sugar-coated nightmares, right? The meaningless world is a nightmare. We sit in and we live that nightmare day after day, and then, you know, again, we seek out things like meditation, and that's a good thing. It is a wonderful practice, and I highly recommend it. I'm profoundly bad at it, but I meditate when I run more than when I sit. I find that it's just a different kind of meditation. You know, however you do it, we meditate to escape these thoughts of anxiety instead of creating a world that doesn't necessarily need that anxiety, right? We're always doing, always doing. And, you know, a lot of the time we approach meditation with questions to say, what is this here to teach me? What do I need to know about this? How do I do this? You know, why is this happening? And we do it because of these questions, that we're trying to make meaning of a world that doesn't have the meaning that we're searching for in it. So we turn to things like these practices to avail us of this versus feeling, when what we need to do is to restructure thoughts into the way that we think about the need for the versus mentality in the first place. That's why this is such an important step to healing. That's why it's such a crucial step to healing. But think about the ways that you compete with spirit to make meaning of things, right? The ways that the ego, not you as in capital Y, this is lowercase y, you, ego, competes with spirit to make meaning of things. We're going to dive into this far more. I'm so excited. I love diving through these lessons every day, because this, as a spiritual practice, it does anchor and ground you in something profound. It does anchor and ground you in that. So a meaningless world engenders fear is the lesson for today, my friends. On that note, I will leave it here. If this was helpful or it resonated for you at all, please like and subscribe. It is something I appreciate everyone who joins the channel and watches. It's small but mighty at the moment, so I'm very happy about that. So thank you so much. And this is it. So I will see you on tomorrow's video, wherever this finds you on the time space continuum, morning, afternoon, or night. I hope that it finds you very well, my friends, and surrounded by so much light and so much of the meaning of both and. All right, everybody, take care.